Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Hall of Fame Show. And if you're wondering, where the hell is Evan Nolan? Well, I'll get there. I'm Kirk Buchner. I run NotInHallOfFame.com, the fictitious Athlete Hall of Fame, fictitious Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and of course, the United States Athletic Hall of Fame. But joining me today is two special guests, because if Evan can't be here, I have to sort of like substitute him with two people. I'm not saying that these are half people.
Evan, the ego, man, his head's not going to fit on camera next time.
But I have two people who have joined me for our Pro Football Hall of Fame discussions. I've got with me first Chris Mouridian from the great city of Wisconsin.
Am I saying nice to have you.
Wisconsin.
Wisconsin. Scotty. It all works.
All right. Good enough. And of course, the Schlegel daddy, who is, well, I want to say from Chicago, but you're actually in Virginia.
That's right. Yeah. Virginia via Iowa, and before that, Illinois, where I was born and raised outside of Chicago. You got it.
Okay. I was not even sure. I wasn't even sure that if you were actually from the Windy City or not.
No. That's Silverstein, not I.
There we go. Well, today we're going to be looking at the latest Hall of Fame related news, and both these two individuals have helped me on our little show that we do, where we sort of like look at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and we have our own, what do you call it, the MCU version?
Alternate universe version, yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about that, but we're not talking about the alternate version. We're talking about the actual version. So, Jeff, I'm really excited to have you here because I know that you are not as happy as most people are in terms of what we saw.
I'll start off with this, Kurt.
Sure.
Is the kind of like standard fare that everybody says, it's a hard job to do. I fully acknowledge that it is. Like, it's a hard knock life. It's a hard job to do. That doesn't mean that you should do a poor job of it. And when I look at the semifinalists, and even as we've talked like via our own kind of group chat, right? Like, we've been kind of, I think, the past few days, like, some of these things make sense, thinking about potential strategies, but then looking at some of these others and saying, why is this player with this resume getting fast-tracked, and player B, who has equal or perhaps in some cases a stronger resume, never gets any traction?
Mm-hmm.
And I think as I continue to go through, the more I get exposed and familiarize myself with the process, the less impressed I am with it. And I know we'll probably talk more about some of the specific players here in a moment, but
yeah, no, fair enough. I just want to like set that up because I think that it's going to be very interesting that you have a very, I don't want to say anti approach, because Chris, yourself, and myself, we have our little chat group amongst X.
Mm-hmm.
Is it X now? I guess so. Sure.
I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where, well, our chat group where we look at everything and how this has sort of gone. Let's just look at. We're gonna go through every player who was actually advanced, and what I want each of you to do is just say like thumbs up, thumbs down, like in terms of whether you thought that we're gonna get here. Are you happy they're here? And let's go from there.
All right.
So alphabetically, we got Eric Allen.
Yes.
Yeah, thumbs up for him.
Absolutely. Hopefully he gets to the round of 15 and gets a shot.
Okay. Someone who is a little bit controversial within our group, not controversial within the actual group, and someone who will probably get into the Hall of Fame shortly, Jared Allen.
He's a someday. He feels like he's advanced too quickly in the process, to me, in my opinion. Bad hair and sack dances got him a ton of media attention in Minnesota.
Doesn't hurt.
It doesn't. And when we look at some of the other names we'll talk about, like I'm going to flame on about those, right? Jared Allen, you could see there's a Hall of Fame resume. And Chris, I know you being a Packers fan, right? Like Allen felt special, but I always looked at Kevin Williams as being more special.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Jared Allen, I think he did put together a Hall of Fame career, but
Yep.
I think media attention's gotten him a little ahead of the curve here.
Because when you look at the numbers, they're not that spectacular to where he's above like other pass rushers like a Charles Haley and so forth. And some of those guys took a long time. And Allen's like we've been talking about, it feels like Allen could be in the 2024 class.
Yeah, I'd be leaning towards him actually making it this year, but yeah. No.
So here's a question for you both here. Jared Allen, to me, again, you talked about media. I like Jared Allen. I would be thrilled as a Saints fan if he was my guy for a few years. Saying that, the media we know loves him.
Mm-hmm.
He knows how to play that game. Whether he was sort of like playing that towards the Hall, I don't want to say that he is or isn't. I don't think that's accurate or not, but how much has his belovedness, is that a word? I don't know. Amongst the media and just the main personality, the social media, let's just say.
I'm gonna give you a really good example of what you're talking about, Kirk.
Sure.
Look at Chad Ochocinco.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at Chad Ochocinco compared to a couple of the other semifinalist wide receivers, we'll talk about it a little bit. His resume is as strong, if not strong. But he took self-promotion, I think, a bit more than the establishment media at the time was comfortable with. Those same media members that are now voting for the Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
And Jared Allen was like the right type, the right level for their tolerance. Like Chad Johnson might have been really good for the media attention in terms of drawing eyeballs and giving content to talk about. But Jared Allen feels, for a variety of reasons, much more like the guy that the voters overall would gravitate to. Even though he never played in the Super Bowl, never won a ring.
Okay. Chris?
Yeah, I see what Jeff's saying there too with Ochocinco there. Obviously the name change right there. I mean, self-promotion right there. So, I think you got two different approaches. Both of them were building themselves up, and Allen's approach seems to have been the more favorable among the media.
Okay. Next one too. Willie Anderson, and I sort of chuckled because I know where this is going to go. Willie Anderson has an interesting stat that is not verified, and I'm going to let Jeff sort of like explain that.
It's not verified because it's BS. Basically, the stat that he put out himself was that he had surrendered, 16 sacks in 13 seasons, which is not accurate. And I think what the tragedy for Willie Anderson actually is a couple things. One, he played its position at right tackle. That for decades by the league has been viewed as the secondary offensive tackle position. You might look at the modern game and say, hey, it's kind of the two bookend tackles are pretty much the same. The league for decades has always drafted left tackles higher than right tackles. Willie Anderson was even originally drafted to play left tackle, got flipped in his rookie season to play right tackle. Left tackles have always got paid more. So left tackles also get more of the all-pro and Pro Bowl attention. So in some ways, it's impressive that Willie Anderson as a right tackle playing the majority of his career for Cincinnati got even some of the accolades that he did. I don't say no to Willie Anderson for the Hall of Fame. I just think that over the past few years, as that sack number started to come out, it artificially inflated his case, and it got him to jump the line over guys like Richmond Webb and so forth.
Right.
That you could say, like, what was so special about Willie Anderson, who had fewer All Pros, fewer Pro Bowls? His play he was an elite all-time right tackle, probably top 5-ish. And if we had like Brian Pierce here, they'd probably reinforce that. So I think he belongs in the Hall of Fame someday. But at this time, for me, if he gets closer to 20 years and he's not in, then I'm actually probably going to start pounding the table for him and say, no, we need to get him in so he doesn't fall into the abyss of the senior pool. It's just, I think there are other guys that should be prioritized right now.
Yeah. For me, I think he's in the 15 this year. I agree that I think Richmond Webb's case should be heard first based on his numbers. I think he had an all-decade team in there as well. It's not to slight Willie Anderson in any way from what he brought to the Bengals there. And you got to remember too, two of the all-time great defensive ends, Reggie White and Bruce Smith, they both rushed from the left side there on the defense. So he wasn't like he was facing nobodies out there. He was facing some of the better ones in the league. So his time will come. I prefer to, you like Jared Allen, maybe let's talk about somebody else that's a little more in the urgent category, but I think he's there.
I think one last thing I'll say about Willie Anderson, if his career was a decade later, where you had PFF potentially putting out like very high ratings for him for a long period of time, and people saw more of his games, I actually think Willie Anderson might be viewed in a little bit higher esteem. It's just, again, with offensive tackles, without some of the postseason accolades, how do you quantify their stats? You could talk about penalties, and then what else are you talking about? Subjective opinions, pass blocking grades, run blocking grades. It's really hard for the offensive line.
All right, so for me, this is the most interesting one. Again, alphabetically, it's Tiki Barber, and I'll throw this here for my personal opinion. I don't have a problem so much if you look at his stats and what he did. The last 3 years of Tiki Barber's career was very impressive. Saying that, I am a big person of the message and the overall story. Tiki, the year after you retired, the Giants won the Super Bowl. Prior to that, he said, like, Eli was, he didn't say crap, but he shit on Eli. Said, essentially, they're not going to win without me. And they did. And if we go to that message, I don't care what we say statistically wise. There's a story here.
I don't disagree with, I know where you're coming from, Kirk, and I don't know that I fully disagree with it. And here's my thinking. You could say teams change from one year to the next.
Sure.
And they certainly do, right? But the fundamental core of the Giants in 2006, for the most part, was the core of the team in 2007, minus Tiki Barber, who they replaced with a platoon of Brandon Jacobs and Ahmad Bradshaw. And when you're talking about that, Kirk, it's a fair question of, well, if this guy was that special and that valuable, how come they didn't win it with him? But there's a whole bunch of other factors there, right? Like Eli was terrible in 2006, and like Tom Coughlin's message at the time really wasn't getting through to the players. He wasn't connecting, which is a lot of his fault, right? But it's a fair question. I will say we've seen this sometimes in the past with teams where they lose their top player. I go way back to the NCAA March Madness tournament. Utah in 97 had Keith Van Horn, right? Like they have their big star. He leaves, and then it's Andre Miller steps up, Michael Doliak steps up, some names you didn't expect to hear, and they make it to the championship game against Kentucky. My point being is sometimes when the star leaves, other guys actually get elevated and they can play better and above themselves.
Right, but this is where the star leaves and says, they're screwed. Sorry.
I think our colleague, and he's called me his colleague, so like nobody can tell me shit the rest of this week, right? Jack Silverstein does some great work for Windy City Gridiron. He's done some work here in comparing like Tiki Barber, and one of the comparisons he put out there was Matt Forte. And it's very fair because a lot of the focus on Tiki Barber is his yards from scrimmage, which he had some great yards from scrimmage numbers seasons. but his touchdown rate is really, really low. And he had some fumble issues throughout his career. I look at a guy like Tiki Barber and say, if there weren't 4 running backs, including him in the top 25, it wouldn't smell so bad to me. But there are 3 other running backs along with him in this 25, which is way too much. And he feels like a guy that should be on a semifinalist list, but he feels like a guy that if he ever got in, it should be in the senior pool. Like, he's the type of guy that feels like the senior pool is for. I could never sit there for the rest of his years of eligibility in good conscience and feel like I can make an argument that Tiki Barber is one of the 5 best players in that particular finalist group.
Interesting. I'm with you there. His inclusion here in the 25 was the big surprise.
Yeah.
Never, the first time. And it's kind of like with the wide receiver group. You have 6 wide receivers. You get them down to 3 when you get to 15, and then they can't get 1 in. You have 2 running backs. None of them none of them are getting pushed forward. Why are we adding 2 more to cloud the mix here? I'm not saying that Eddie George, who we'll get to later, and Tiki Barber are not worthy of consideration. And this is Eddie George's second time, Tiki Barber's first.
Mm-hmm.
But this is how the wide receiver backlog, got there. The logjam got there by continuing to push people up there rather than sorting out the ones that are already there. And it's good for Tiki. You get your case heard. I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that Rondé got elected last year, but
it doesn't hurt, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, like
especially when he's there presenting Rondé. So
yep.
Chance to schmooze a little bit, I guess. But
media taking care of media, technically, right?
In a way. But his career was worthy of consideration, 100%. I wouldn't see him moving forward at this point, but stranger things happen.
Yep, stranger things do happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So not so strange. Anquan Bolden advances as a wide receiver. You got some thoughts there, Jeff?
I think it's the fact that Anquan Bolden was a very high-end number 2 wide receiver for most of his career, right?
Mm-hmm.
We think about him as the Robin to Larry Fitzgerald's Batman for many years in Arizona.
Okay.
And then he goes, he plays with Torrey Smith in Baltimore. He's in San Francisco with Crabtree. Just because these guys have quantifiable, easy to understand stats doesn't mean that they all need to get to this point. Chris made a reference to like the wide receiver backlog at 6. And I would look at a Bolden again and I bring up like a Chad Ochocinco. What was so dramatically different in between the 2 in terms of their careers and so forth that one has been a semifinalist multiple times, the other one doesn't sniff it. Yet a guy like Steve, yeah, exactly. Right now we'll get to Hines Ward, but specific to Anquan Bolden, as Jack points out, he's gotten to the semifinals so early, unless the Hall of Fame reverts or like changes trajectory and course corrects, Anquan Bolden's going to get in at some point in the next 5 to 10 years as a modern candidate. Because he's been a multiple time semifinalist and he's hit, I think at least 2 times now, very early in his 20-year eligibility, as he was last year.
Every year.
Every year
he's been eligible.
That's right. That indicates to us, without some screwy like course correction, Anquan Bolden's going to be a Hall of Famer. And that he's the type of guy you respect and you say, this guy played tough. He was physical. He was a really good player. But I mean, come on, you saw him next to a Larry Fitzgerald. You see a clear difference. I look to me at a Steve Smith Sr. and I see a clear difference.
Right. Okay. I'm the Saints guy, but I'm going to hold off here. Jari Evans, I'm happy personally that he's a 2-time semifinalist in the second year, but I'm willing to sort of like hold off on this for a bit personally.
Well, being that he's a former Packer, I'll step up here first.
Yeah, go. I was waiting for you to do it.
There you go. No, it's again, we talked about Willie Anderson, offensive lineman, even more so the interior offensive lineman. There's really very little you can kind of point to. One thing you can point to though is his accolades, his postseason accolades, and he's got multiple first team All Pros. He's got multiple Pro Bowls. He was a rock down there for the Saints. Did play the one season with Green Bay, and he's a Saint. We'll give him back to Kirk.
Yeah, but no, I'm just not right. Like, all right about this. I think we've seen this in some of our conversations in the past. Like, I can wait right now for him. There are people that we have talked about before. Richmond being one who's not here, that I'm far bigger on personally. So like I think Jari Evans is a Hall of Famer. Is he right now? Should he be here ahead of some people? Probably not. But here he is.
The only thing I'll say about Evans is at least there's some interior line representation in the 25, like in the semifinalist group.
Right.
So that's where I don't want to say too much bad about it because I'm with you, Kirk. Like someday he belongs in Canton. He feels like he's the type of guy based off of the historical precedent. He's not the Steve Hutchinson level, like, or even the Alan Faneca level. Right. So yeah, Shields, like he just feels like he waits a few years, but at least he's got some traction. So I'm really not trying to say anything too publicly to like countermand that.
Yeah,
because at least somebody on the interior
I love the
line,
guy, but I mean, like,
yeah.
Am I going to say that he's the top 5 in this? No, he's not.
I think he could be top 10. I think he could be pushed forward. Yeah, this year. I really do. I think there's a lot of sentiment towards him. 2 years in a row that he's been semifinalist. He didn't make the top 15 last year, but we got several openings this year from the 5 that were selected and Albert Lewis graduating. So I
that's one way to put it.
So there's some openings, and I think that the overall high end talent, it's there. We got guys that are definitely we look at and say they're going in this year, but I think it's an interesting case, and I think he does have a chance to slide forward a little further, a little faster than maybe what's expected.
He's got positional uniqueness, which can help, right? Compared to all the other candidates, he could say, "I'm the one that did this."
Yep.
Here's one that's fascinating to me. We're gonna be talking about the Baseball Hall of Fame soon and compiling.
Yep.
There is not a bigger compiler in football to me. And again, who I love. I'm not sure I think he's a Hall of Famer, but I would have loved to have him as a linebacker for my team for years. London Fletcher.
You watch London Fletcher throughout his career and you saw a solid player.
Sure.
He wasn't the guy that made the stop to win the Rams the Super Bowl. That was Mike Jones. So on the game's biggest stage, at the biggest moment, he was nowhere to be found, so to speak, right? You could say he had a long career. He compiled a bunch of tackles. Some of his turnover numbers are okay. Yeah, a lot of tackles, right? But tackles can be a somewhat inconsistent stat. So, like,
of course,
it's not as clearly defined as interceptions or you recovered a fumble. But I'm sorry, like when you look at the era that he played in, he just doesn't feel like he was on that tier. Like if you're talking about like a Ray Lewis, a Brian Urlacher, and then you maybe jump down a peg or two and you say there's a Zach Thomas. I wouldn't have looked at. I'm not even bringing up Patrick Willis, right? We'll get to him. He's more in the Lewis Urlacher tier. But Fletcher feels like even a clear step below a Zach Thomas. Good player, long career, but tell me what he ever did that was special or marquee.
Minnie Minoso, just like he's just lots of hits. But was he ever the top 5 guy in his position? He wasn't.
And I think even when you look back at his Pro Bowls, I think he was like a 4-time Pro Bowler. If I'm not mistaken, all 4 of them, he was a replacement.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think he was a replacement, which to me is like you were a second tier Pro Bowler. You technically get the resume.
So how do you get here then, you think?
I think it's the tackles.
It's
I
the
think
tackle number. It's got to be.
It's got to be. It's got to be somebody going to a stat head or a Pro Football Reference or one of those great sites and saying, "Hey, this guy had a shit ton of tackles." He did, right? Like that's true.
Sure.
He was a good player, but
A very good player.
here's the way I would think of it. If you were building a defense and you wanted an inside linebacker, are you taking Patrick Willis or London Fletcher?
I think we know that answer.
And that's what I mean. Like, that's not even a debate, right? You're taking Patrick Willis.
Right.
All right,
And
here's
like,
one for
it's
you.
such an easy answer.
Are you taking London Fletcher? Or are you taking Navarro Bowman?
At their peak, I'm taking Navarro Bowman.
Exactly. And he's not even in here.
That's exactly it, right?
Yeah.
What's really curious about London Fletcher is most people don't even remember he played for the Rams on that Super Bowl team in '99, right?
Right.
Like when you
think of it
about,
as the Redskins.
Yeah, when you think about that defense, you would hear a lot more about a Kevin Carter, a Grant Wistrom, Mike Jones making the big play in the Super Bowl. You hardly even remember it. So he's unique in terms of he got some media attention, but he didn't always get the shine in the spotlight. And yet here he is again for some reason, which means he's probably getting into camp someday as a modern candidate, which to me feels crazy.
Or might be like a Jim Marshall.
He could be. And that feels more appropriate. Like good player, long period of time, doesn't meet that Hall of Fame threshold.
Okay, so here's somebody who I think is a 50-50 for the first ballot. Antonio Gates, tight end.
Positional uniqueness. I think it's over 120. Was it like is it 112 or 120, whatever it is, career touchdown receptions? Career record holder, when he retired as a tight end.
I think we all agree he's going to be a Hall of Famer. Is he first ballot or second? Is really where I'm going here.
I think part of that could depend on whether the committee decides to put in one or two wide receivers this year. What I'm trying to assert is in that room, apparently the big difference maker for Rondé Barber was the defensive touchdowns last time. That's why he got it. Gotcha. And I'm saying when you hold up an Antonio Gates and you say 100, whatever, 20 plus, whatever the hell it was, career receiving touchdowns, that's a big monster number that everybody can understand and relate to. And you could say he ranks top 10 or so, top 15 all time in total touchdowns. That plays really well. I think it's at least 50-50 he's first ballot, but it could be impacted by them wanting to clear some of that wide receiver backlog and maybe putting in both Andre Johnson and Torrey Holt this year.
I'm kind of there with you. He's a Hall of Famer, whether it's first year, second year. It just depends on who else is just got the traction this year. If he's a first ballot, I'm not bothered by it. If he waits a year, I'm not bothered by it. It just he's an interesting case. He's as he's the only tight end. They haven't really got a couple of tight ends that'll be coming up, but
yeah.
If I'm remembering right too, wasn't he like a basketball player in college that converted over to tight end for the pros? So
he was a power
quick learner
at Penn State when they made a run to the Elite Eight.
Yeah, quick learner there.
Oh, him too.
Yeah, like
wasn't Gonzalez?
Yeah, Gonzalez played basketball. Jimmy Graham played basketball. The other thing I'll say about Antonio Gates, and Kirk, maybe this is like if we were in the room, if I wanted to push him into the Hall, it's positional uniqueness, it's the touchdown number, and some of the longevity. If I wanted to keep him out a year, I would say he played with some great quarterbacks, specifically Phillip Rivers, right, throughout his career. He was either option A or option B in the passing game throughout his entire career. He wasn't blocking. And I think he only had maybe 2,000 to 3,000 yard receiving seasons. He was a glorified wide receiver. And if we view those numbers in the context of a glorified wide receiver, they don't hold up nearly as well outside of the touchdowns. So I think it's like the old thing about Sean Alexander, a bunch of his touchdown runs were 1 yard runs. The majority of them were not. For Antonio Gates, the majority of his touchdowns were red zone touchdowns, right? But they are still touchdowns. But I think like that yardage and the fact that he had one role, that would be the argument I would use against him if I had to. If it's not year one, I would then be a hypocrite the next year and be like, no, we need to hurry up and get Antonio Gates in because he is on that level, clearly.
Okay, so continuing along with that, we have Eddie George, who is second-time semifinalist.
Semifinalist in 21, fell off in 22, back in, or 24. So
yeah,
I think 21 and back in 24. So it you can, I guess, rise up, fall back, rise up again. But I mean, he was a good running back. I don't think I think he's the fourth of the four that are in the mix here, and
yes.
He could actually be 5 or 6 depending on if you were to look at some of the other guys that didn't get advanced, like a Corey Dillon or a Sean Alexander, or Priest Holmes.
Yes,
but I don't see him going beyond the class or the run of 25.
I think I look at Eddie George and I say he was clearly a star in the league. Like he wasn't the Madden cover guy for nothing, right? And he was a key cog on a Titans team that did go to the Super Bowl and got this close to it. He was a guy that made some big plays for sure throughout his career, but he's a pretty inefficient running back. I think his career yards per carry average is a little bit below 4 yards. It might be like 3.6, 3.7. Again, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I know it's under 4. And when I look at a guy like that, it feels like he had high volume and low efficiency. Whereas you look at a Derrick Henry, speaking of the team, where someday we might be talking about whether or not he belongs, you will look at Derrick Henry and say when he was healthy, high volume and very high efficiency. Like, and in some ways, I wonder if that biases me a little against Eddie George because I see another Titans running back and I say, well, he's clearly better. George was good. And in a bubble, he feels like the type of guy that you could argue belongs in like a top 25 list, but feels like another guy that I could never advocate for in the modern. Feels like the type of guy that a senior process would have to get to him to get him in.
I'd agree with that. Dwight Freeney is an interesting one. Like, I do not see him getting this far this fast. Am I missing something?
No, I think I know exactly what it is.
Okay.
It's called the Peyton Manning effect. Everybody's going to think about, wait, he played with Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning was on the other side of the ball. That makes absolutely no goddamn sense. When you think about it, it absolutely, totally makes sense. Think about from the time he came into the league out of Syracuse in 2002, how many big time, marquee, prime time, national exposure television games did Dwight Freeney play in? Because of Peyton Manning, full stop, period. When you look at his numbers, his sack totals are no higher than Leslie O'Neal. Dwight Freeney was not great against the run. Yes, he had some decent forced fumbled numbers, but it's a lot easier to do that when you always have the lead because of Peyton Manning and you could just go tee off on the opposing quarterbacks. So you think about that 2006 Colts defense, the best player on that defense, full stop, was Bob Sanders. Their run defense was historically awful until Bob Sanders came back. And when he came back, they were better. And some could argue that defense saved their ass in those 2006 playoffs more than once. That wasn't Dwight Freeney. Not only, Kirk, is he too fast up the process. He was a first-time finalist. He's going to be a first-time finalist again. I don't even think he belongs in the top 25 right now.
Okay.
I think he's overrated, personally. Good player, right? But what's the difference between him and a guy like a Leslie O'Neal in year 20 that can't even get to the semifinals, and Leslie O'Neal could cover and Leslie O'Neal could play the run?
Well, I'm huge on Leslie O'Neal. So, Chris?
Yeah.
Agreed. I mean, I looked at the defensive outside linebacker, the rush category, and I didn't see him as moving this quickly out of that group there. They appear poised on Jared Allen. I don't think you need guys like Dwight Freeney in there to counter the arguments against or for. He's a great player, deserving of his turn, but this seems fast. And
I'll put it. I'm sorry, Chris. I was going to ask you one question.
Sure.
Jared Allen or Dwight Freeney if you needed a defensive end?
Ooh.
I'd probably go with Jared Allen.
Yeah. Why? Because he was a higher end elite edge rusher at his peak. This was a guy that could lead the league with 20 sacks. Freeney wasn't that guy. I don't know. Chris, feel differently, or go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, Jared Allen, before he came to Minnesota, was putting up numbers with Kansas City with less of help on the front.
Yeah, I think to me that's the thing of there is a clear difference to me, even though the career sack numbers are pretty similar.
Mm-hmm.
Like Jared Allen and Dwight Freeney being on a pretty close plane, something's off there.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so going there, here's somebody who if I'm going to go like full blown on what the media told me, James Harrison belongs here. Am I wrong?
He thinks you're wrong. He came out and said he doesn't see himself as a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
You remember him for the Super Bowl pick six. You remember him for some big sack numbers. You remember him for some antics. He's got a case. He's in the mix. Seems a little like Freeney seems a little fast.
Yeah.
But I don't mind that he's in there. More so than I don't mind him being in there over Freeney. Like between those two, I'd rather talk Harrison than Freeney. But either guy, just kind of a little head scratchy as far as how fast.
At his pure peak, I'm taking James Harrison all day over Dwight Freeney. And I don't mean this to turn in like the Dwight Freeney slander hour, but hey, the name of the game here is you got to differentiate, right? You got to figure out who belongs and who doesn't at this time.
Yeah.
My problem with James Harrison is his primary role was as a pass rusher. He has less than 100 career sacks. He really had like 5 pretty good to great seasons, and that's about it. You could say, well, he won 2 Super Bowls. He wasn't even a starter on the 2005 Steelers team. Obviously, to your point, Chris, he was in 2008, and he took advantage of that spotlight, right?
Oh, yeah.
But I think it's a combination of that memory combined with the team that he plays for. The voters over the years have loved the Steelers organization. Great organization. Maybe sometimes gets a few too many players into the hall. This feels like a guy that didn't need to be a multi-time semifinalist so soon. He's getting in, and he feels like the guy that should require more conversation. He had less than 90 career sacks. As a guy whose primary job, he could do other things, right? But his primary job was to rush the passer. Feels a little early.
Yeah. Agreed.
Right, so from there, we got Rodney Harrison, who's an interesting person. In terms of accolades, he didn't have a whole lot, but we all know why.
The rep is a dirty player, right?
Yes.
That's definitely going to work against him.
Yeah, but here he is.
And here's the thing. When you talk about the measurable statistics, this is where I get at my Tim McDonald soapbox just a little bit.
Go ahead.
Tim McDonald had more career interceptions, more career interception return yardage, more career interception touchdowns, more defensive touchdowns, more had a higher ratio or a better ratio in terms of games played per turnover created. And then you take along the postseason accolades, the independent scouting sources over the years that have graded McDonald higher than Rodney Harrison. Harrison's a guy, I think his accolades don't fully match like how good of a player he was. And there is a piece at some point, right? Like he was on 2 of those Patriots Super Bowl teams.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That is arguably a defense, a dynasty that's underrepresented and may continue to be underrepresented in the hall when you think about guys like Willie McGinnis, et cetera. but I can't in good faith sit there and say like he belongs when Tim McDonald is the better player and has the better numbers. And it's like, how does he end up here? And a guy like McDonald, who by the way was also in year 20, which means now he goes into the senior pool of this, can't even sniff this. That's what doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, and you did a great job in our call the other night, educating us on Tim McDonald. And I wasn't as high on him until I listened to you, and you convinced me that he's really somebody that was overlooked. And Harrison, was he on the Chargers Super Bowl team too, or
He was a role player because that was his rookie year in '94.
yeah,
so,
okay. So
yeah, that was the Sayal, Leslie O'Neal, Chris Mims team.
right,
like,
right.
Yeah, those were the guys. Rodney Harrison was a role player as a rookie.
Yeah, but his numbers are up there with some of the recent inductees.
Mhm.
So it makes sense that he's in the mix. I'm with you. I'd rather see the 20-year guy get his day in court than a guy that's got some more time on his side. But I don't mind him being in the room for the 25. I just don't see him moving to the 15.
Like in theory, if Tim McDonald's on this list, I have no problem with Rodney Harrison being on the list as well. My problem is more by the omission of McDonald. And to your point, Chris, when I think about pure safety play, I take Rodney Harrison over John Lynch and Steve Atwater. I wouldn't take him maybe over Leroy Butler, but I would take him over John Lynch all day of the
week. Yeah, I was a big fan of Steve Atwater, the hard hits, the big plays. I mean, he kind of won me over there, even though he was with the Broncos. But yeah, he was, his accelerated election kind of raised some questions, but I had no problem with him getting in when he did. But yeah, for sure, I can see the arguments for and against.
Kirk, you kind of had a reaction there to what I said about him versus Lynch.
All right, so moving on. Okay, so we have Devin Hester, who we all think it should be in the Hall of Fame. So let's just move on from that.
Well, actually, one quick thing.
Sure.
I wonder if he's a guy that's going to stall out for a couple years. Because if you remember, last time he went from in first ballot, he was not only a finalist, but he made it to the round of 10, right? He made it past the first cut down. This time he didn't, which means a number of guys moved past him in the process because you automatically clear out 5 slots every. So that means at least 6 guys moved ahead of him. Right. And you're saying 5 guys moved up, and let's say Albert Lewis was the 6th. Right. And I wonder, like, Devin Hester feels like he gets to the finals, but does he sit there for a few years and wait in that like 11 to 15 group and has trouble breaking out a little bit? Maybe because of the wide receivers. Go ahead, Chris. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I can see him, as you described, stalling out there. And I think it's because they got to get it through their heads that they can elect a guy whose primary contribution was special teams superstar. He played wide receiver. He was, a weapon on offense at times, but he was dangerous weapon as a special teamer. And
yes,
they have to get it through their heads that what his contributions are worthy of being in the Hall of Fame. And this has come from a guy that, every time they had to punt the ball against to the Bears, he kind of held your breath because he knew that could change the game.
You think about his first game as a pro, 2006 in Lambeau when the Bears shut out the Packers. Sorry, Chris, bringing up memory. I'm no not. That was Devin Hester's first career punt return touchdown.
Yeah,
it was like right there. And you think about 2006, and I know quarterback traditionally is always going to win the MVP award. It's a quarterback-driven league. Quarterback is the name of the game. When I go back to 2006, though, I think Devin Hester was the most valuable player to his team in the league that year. He changed games in a way that I think no other player did. Because when you compare the 2005 Bears to the 2006 Bears, through that season, they lost 2 studs off of that defense and Tommy Harris and Mike Brown, and still found a way to make the Super Bowl. Teams kicking to Devin Hester, and he has big returns, let alone the touchdowns. teams refusing to kick to him. The Colts were so afraid of him that they were willing to lose the Super Bowl to not have him kill them by surrendering the field position at the 40-yard line every time. But I think to your point, Chris, it's that position and kind of that special team stigma. He might take a little bit. He's going to get there as he should, but it might take a little bit.
Yeah, I think he's gonna get there soon. Just a matter of like when. Like for our purposes, he's already there. Torrey Holt, I think, is somebody also who is there for us. Andre Johnson.
And I guess we talk about both of them at the same time, right?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I've always viewed Andre Johnson, Steve Smith, Torrey Holt, like if I was ordering the 1 through 3. But all three of those guys to me are clear.
In that order?
In that order. I would take Andre Johnson 1, Steve Smith 2, Torrey Holt 3.
Wow, okay.
The thing is with Torrey Holt and Andre Johnson, I prefer Andre. I think Andre was a little better. I think Andre did more in a worse situation. That said, I really don't care which one of them they get into the Hall of Fame this year. The voters at least have to get one of these guys, and you can make a strong argument you need to get both of them through.
Okay.
Jeff, do you put Steve Smith ahead of Torrey Holt by basis of the number 1 against number 2 type wide receiver, or is it more what kind of differentiates between the two for you?
I think some of Steve Smith's big play ability and his big performances in the playoffs specifically. Like, this is a guy that put up some monster games when the lights were brightest. This was a guy that didn't play always in the same quality of offense as some other guys, right? Like, Jake Delhomme was his quarterback a good portion of his career. It was not Cam Newton, right? And I think about Steve Smith and say, this was a guy that was a true alpha. And I thought he was a better all-around wide receiver than Torrey Holt.
Okay. Because I had them alternate. I had Torrey Holt ahead of Steve Smith. More so because of how long Torrey Holt's had to wait. I just, he's put the numbers up. He was the Robin to Isaac Bruce's Batman during the Greatest Show on Turf years, but he was still he still put up the numbers. He still had to get open. He still had to catch the ball. He still had to, make the plays, and he did. And so that's where I'm kind of coming from them. I had Steve Smith as third. I actually have Hines Ward as fourth, but we can discuss that later.
Yeah.
But it does seem like the group of 6, there is quite a few guys that you kind of look at would be the number 2 on their team. Between Bolden, between Holt, between Reggie Wayne.
Even a couple of years with Hines Ward, when you talk about like Plaxico Burress or Santonio Holmes,
sure,
you could argue
right.
he was number 2, right?
Exactly, a little bit different role. But I'm Johnson all the way on this one here. I think he needs to be the guy they push forward here. What he did with the Texans team with who was his quarterback? Yeah, exactly.
Matt Schaub was his most notable. Exactly.
Yeah. So I mean, just a dominant player for a team that wasn't at the top of their game at that time. So
I think this is where last year we look at, both Darrelle Revis and Rondé Barber getting in. And it's like, well, if you're going to do that, then Barber could have waited a year and it should have been Albert Lewis. But if you still weren't going to put in Albert Lewis, Barber still could have waited a year. Get either Andre Johnson or Torrey Holt in. I don't care which one it is at this point, right? If you say Torrey Holt because he waited a little longer, fine. I don't care. Just get Andre in the next year or vice versa. Mm-hmm. These two guys we just talked about, they need to be at least one of them in this class, if not both. And if only one of them is next year, the class should start with them. Hell with any other first ballot guys, like you say, we got to get him in first.
Yep. And just kind of looking down the road, we got Larry Fitzgerald coming up in a couple of years too. So that's just going to add to the mix. Right. And as you described earlier, there's a few guys on the outside looking in right now that have cases that could be heard or should be heard.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so as we advance, we got Robert Mathis and Julius Peppers, both defensive ends, saying that we get Peppers and Mathis. Am I wrong?
Peppers is the safest bet for a first ballot guy this year, and he deserves to be.
Absolutely. Yeah.
He's on that plane.
So
Mathis.
let's look at Mathis.
Yeah.
What do we have here?
Peyton Manning effect.
Yeah, what we said about Freeney a little while ago, kind of the same thing there. He was a pass rusher, and I think he was a situational guy to start with. I mean, he wasn't even a starter for his first few years.
Okay. So moving on, we got
he said that's enough of Robert Mathis. No, I just want to call out one other thing.
No, unless there's any reason not to.
No, I think there's one other thing, Kurt. He's been a multi-time semifinalist, and he wasn't even the top defensive end on his team. That was Dwight Freeney. Freeney was the alpha guy. Mathis was the secondary guy.
Yeah, right.
How does he get there and a Simeon Rice does it? How does he get there already and a Leslie O'Neal does it? Neil Smith, right? Guys that were actually alpha pass rushers on their team. I don't get it. Other than the Peyton Manning effect.
Well, we got two guys here who were semis. God damn. No, I feel so bad because I don't want to dump on them, but we're going to. Fred Taylor, Hines Ward.
Fred Taylor is the compiler guy just because he played a little longer in his career and put up a few more yards. This is where I think our group was a little cynical about Fred Taylor was in this spot only because he had the most career rushing yards. And it's kind of, if that's really what's letting him get in here, that's kind of silly. Because even if you want to say, well, it's because there aren't enough. Well, no, I'm going to say if it's going to be the whole thing of there's not enough Jaguars in the Hall of Fame, well, then why in the hell is Jimmy Smith not one of these 6 wide receivers? He was actually a wide receiver 1, right? This is the stuff that starts to not make sense. Fred Taylor was good, solid all-around player, long, productive career. Did you ever watch Fred Taylor and truly think he was elite or special at his position?
Personally, never.
I don't think he was ever the best running back in the league in any of his years. Good player, but never the best in the league at his position.
He was a 6 of 10 guy for a long time, which is great. I mean, I think that the three of us, we have different Hall of Fame bases or spaces, but if he was our guy for a 5-year period, we'd both be happy, right?
Oh yeah.
You know who I think of him as is like a Matt Forte type, a Neil Anderson type, if I put it into Bears speak. Maybe you would think of him on Green for the Packers.
Yeah, great comparison. Yeah.
Great comparison. Really good career. You'd love to have him as your back. That don't make him a Hall of Famer.
Okay, so how did he get here?
That's a great question. He was a good player. He has a lot of yards rushed. It's got to be the stats.
It's got to be the career rushing yards, right? Specifically in his placement on the ranking on that list. And I wonder if it was a bit of, we got to give the Jaguars a little bit of love. I wonder if it's
with Tony Baselli.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, that even goes away, right? A little bit with Baselli's induction recently. I wonder if this is one of these ones where you have 50 voters vote, but is Fred Taylor 24th or 25th in the voting each time? He just has just enough support to slip through, but he never gets to the next level.
They feel they gotta vote or move a running back or two in, and they look at the stats.
Maybe because
there you go.
It's interesting.
Okay, so let's look at Hines Ward, who to me is a Susan Lucci.
He's Eric King.
Of this group, it's
he's gonna get into the Hall of Fame, and that's so annoying.
Is he?
He's been a semifinalist every single time. Every single year he's been a semifinalist.
Year 9?
No, it's what is it? Year 7, year 8, whatever year it is. He's been a semifinalist every time, and again, for a guy to be that semifinalist that many times, unless precedent changes with the voters in the process, he's getting in. He played for the Steelers. He has a Super Bowl MVP. I think some of his
Susan Bucci Ward. I'm telling you.
I think Hines Ward is the guy that you got to use the eye test on, because a lot of his the guys pushing him, they point to his all around play. He was doing the dirty work that allowed the Steelers to move the ball down the field that didn't get the attention, but he still had 1,000 receptions, over 10,000 yards, Super Bowl MVP, postseason accolades. Like I said earlier, he's my number 4. He spent a lot of years as a number 1 with Pittsburgh. It's one of those guys though. At this point, what more do you need to hear to move him forward? What has been said to this point to get him into the 10, into the final 5, if that, as you say, he's going to get there at some point. What's the words that haven't been spoken again for his career?
It's crazy. Are you thinking about that just in terms of, at this point, it's kind of like crap or get off the pot? He's been in the semifinals so many times. Why is he not getting to the finals? You clearly want to put him in at some point. Just hurry up and get it the hell over with.
So it's a great way to put it. Exactly.
I don't. To be clear, I think he's a gold standard Hall of Very good guy. I would not put him in the Hall of Fame. I could understand why others would. I think he was a little underrated sometimes as a pass catcher and a little overrated as a blocker. And his Super Bowl MVP was kind of a weak game and an performance, like 5 catches, 123 yards, a touchdown. Then he threw the touchdown past Antoine Randall. Like it's a solid MVP performance, but even that doesn't really hold up. And the other Super Bowl, it was Santonio Holmes that caught the game-winning touchdown.
Yeah, that was great catch.
Yeah, all-timer.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. All right. So we got Ricky Watters, who I think is our big running back at this point.
Yes. Ricky Watters, when we did our running back show, if you remember a few months ago, there's a plug. He was our number 1 guy. And I think most of us that were in that conversation at the time felt like this is our clear number 1. And I think it's the prototype West Coast offense running back at a time where the West Coast offense ruled the NFL. People forget about his first 3 years with the 49ers, including the Super Bowl 29 performance where he had 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, they shouldn't, but yeah.
They shouldn't, but they do.
Yeah.
Most other years, he's the Super Bowl MVP.
Here's the thing that for me, I look at Ricky Watters as Roger Craig Jr.
Better.
And well, yeah, but Roger Craig should be in the Hall of Fame to me.
I think Ricky Watters has more of those traditional running back numbers with the receiving numbers that when you look at it, and the aggregate clearly differentiate him from Craig. I agree. Like Craig's got a unique lane, and it's a hard story.
You can see where I'm going with that.
I do, and I think what hurts Ricky Watters is the media perception for who, for what, why. If you remember years ago, they were asking like, why didn't you try to catch that ball over the middle when he was in Philly? He got alligator arms. He said, for who? For what? And I think that's the thing that's kept him down all these years, and it's a real shame.
Yeah.
So I think Ricky Watters would be in the Hall of Fame if he didn't leave San Francisco.
Yes,
he just fit that offense so well. It would have put up such great numbers in that offense. He chased the buck, went to Philly. He had good years with Philly, but I think he would have had great years with San Francisco, and I think that hurt him going forward.
He possibly, if he stays, let's say, Chris, to your point, it's a great point. He went to San Fran in '92 in the draft out of Notre Dame, right? Mm-hmm. If he stays there through '97 or '98, plays the whole peak of his career in San Fran, he might have been a first ballot guy with the numbers he would have put up.
Oh, for sure. In San Francisco, they were right there every year going into the '90s. So they're the Packers' rival. They had to win that battle to get in.
Yep,
he's there. Maybe they don't win that battle.
It's possible.
All right. Well, I guess we'll love Ricky. Reggie Wayne. who did not get a lot of love from us.
Another number 2 guy that, well, I shouldn't say he's a very good receiver. He was the number 2 with Indianapolis behind Marvin Harrison, and you know he's in the mix with all 6 the other ones that are in here.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's just a half a step behind, say, like a Hines Ward, in my opinion. Like I say, he's like my number 5.
Are we giving him like Reggie so much like Peyton love?
Well, when you have Peyton Manning throwing you the ball, you're gonna have some great seasons and great great
This is wrong,
career numbers.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
And to be fair to him, like he did have a few seasons where he was the clear cut number 1 guy in Indy, and he at least had 1 or 2 seasons with Andrew Luck throwing on the ball that he still put up some decent numbers. But to the point, like you're a little higher, Chris, on Hines Ward than I am. Mm-hmm. But I still find it interesting. Like when you named your top 4, you didn't even think about Reggie Wayne. When I think about Reggie Wayne, it's like even if he's 4th out of these 6, to me, there is such a clear valley, to me at least, between Andre Johnson, Steve Smith, Torrey Holt, and then Reggie Wayne. Like it's a clear distinction, right?
Sure.
And it's crazy. Last year he ended up being in the round of 15. He got to the finalist round. He got into the room. Yep. And I at this point it's like trying to talk him down too much, just feels like it's fighting the flow. If they need to get him in the next 3 years to clear up some of this backlog that the voters have created for themselves.
Yeah, he'll be in the top 15 again. He may be top 10, this year if they really decide they're going to push the wide receivers and try to get that backlog cleared out. So, not in no way am I trying to disparage what he did or anything like that. It's just my opinion and my rankings, and I see him as just a half a step behind Hines Ward.
Okay, that's fair. So we got Vince Wilfork, who is, man, I love that guy, but is he a Hall of Famer?
I could say yes, in part because of that Patriots representation, right? And like the length of time there. But he also wasn't there for all 3 of the first 3 championships. He was drafted, 2004? Was he 21st pick? Ben Watson was 30.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I'm not going to knock him too much for being in this spot. I personally would have put Kevin Williams here instead. But to have an interior defensive lineman that didn't have massive sack numbers to even get to this point, and somebody that represents a great Patriots dynasty, like I'm not going to beef with that. And I would hope at some point he actually does advance in the process. I just wish it was Kevin Williams instead.
Fair. Chris?
Yeah, no, for sure. It's somebody that is just was really a run stuffer and an anchor on that line to be in the top 25. It's a great accomplishment. He will move forward at some point. And I'm with you, with Jeff there. Kevin Williams is just such a glaring oversight on this group of 25 that you just got to scratch your head every year when the list comes out and he's not on it.
And if I could throw out one other name really quickly, when I think about what Vince Wilfork did, I think Ted Washington has been criminally underrepresented when you think about the Hall of Fame process. Like you think about the fact he was still playing all the way through 2006, or I think it was 2007. So he still got some years of eligibility. But when you think about a guy and you say prototype nose tackle of all time, right? You might hear some folks say like a curly cut. Backer fans might say Gilbert Brown in the Gravedigger. But if you think about when Ted Washington went places, I saw it up close and personal with the 2001 Bears. When he came into the middle of that defense, teams just could not run on him, period. He was the preeminent interior run stuffing force. And it's not to knock Vince Wilfork. I personally, if I had my druthers, would put Ted Washington here first.
No, it's fair. So we got Patrick Willis, who we've all sort of inducted in. Darren Woodson is fascinating to me. So
Hall of Famer, underrepresented 90s Cowboys defense, right? Because you say Dion, but Dion is just as known for the Falcons and his year with the 49ers. Right? You think about Charles Haley, probably just as known, if not more so, for his longer career with the 49ers. Pure Cowboys guy, like he was the best thing to come out of that Herschel Walker trade back in the day. Darren Woodson was a starter and a key starter on 2 of the 3 Cowboys Super Bowls. The 92 one, he was a bit player. Tim McDonald is better. Tim McDonald should be the one that's going on and getting inducted this year. Should have already been inducted. I think Darren Woodson partially got screwed by the safety jam that we had for a few years, right? With Atwater, Lynch, Leroy Butler, like
Rodney Harrison.
Yeah, like exactly right. Darren Woodson gets kind of caught up in that mix, and Brian Dawkins was a part of that. And they've started to work their way through. I think Darren Woodson is like collateral damage of that. He's going to get in. He should get in. I don't think it's this year, but it needs to be soon, and I assume it will be.
Yeah, he's a later term guy too, so the sooner the better on getting him in. He belongs there. Cowboys all-time leading tackler. So we were talking about some great years, some great players on that Cowboys defense. He's your all-time leader. So
he was a unique strong safety too, right, Chris? I know, like, he's a bane in your existence as a Packers fan, as for a few years when the Packers couldn't get past the Cowboys.
Couldn't get over that hump. Yeah.
Woodson was great in coverage for a strong safety. Like, he was not just an in the box guy.
No.
Like,
no, he was a thorn on everybody's side. But yeah, definitely when they couldn't get over that hump in with Dallas, he definitely was one of the main reasons.
Yep.
Okay. So we got a big thing here with baseball. The Baseball Hall of Fame has made their official ballots. So, with the 2 of you, let's take a look at who we think should advance.
Okay.
Sound good? Bobby Abreu. He's sort of like hanging on.
I think he's
patient hitter.
Yeah, I'll tell you, with Bobby Abreu, he's one of those guys to me that if you're really into sabermetrics and analytics, you put a greater value on him than I think baseball reality puts on him. Damn good player for a long period of time. Okay. Did you ever look at Bobby Abreu? And I didn't compare him to like a Carlos Beltran.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, cheating stuff aside, right? Carlos Beltran, Bobby Abreu, to me, there's a clear difference. And it's Beltran is like a clear notch ahead. Whereas Abreu is, like, and I'm still like, is Beltran really a Hall of Famer? But Abreu is like, this is a good, solid player for a long period of time. But what did he ever impact? When was he ever truly great at his position? When was he ever like the marquee guy? I just don't see it.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I don't see him ever being the best at his position. The funny thing is, when David Ortiz was being on his first ballot, Bobby Abreu and David Ortiz numbers matched up very, very comparably. The big difference was Ortiz had the home runs, Abreu had stolen bases. A very smart player, very good player, but to me, not a Hall of Fame player.
And when you talk about the stolen bases are great, and I wish we saw more stolen bases in modern baseball, make it more exciting, right? But that home run disparity is quite a bit.
It is.
Right? And that's significant to me. So I think it's fair, right? Like, Abreu was a 4.5 tool guy to me. He could do everything else and hit with some power.
Right. And not to say that comparing Abreu and Ortiz as players, obviously Ortiz was very, postseason and everything else like that. But just on paper, looking at their numbers, it was just kind of surprising how close they really were in a lot of the categories.
Yes. All right. So neither of you would vote for Bobby.
No.
Okay. That's fair. Okay. Jays fan here. Jose Bautista. I'm so happy. I'll just sort of say this here. I'm really happy that he's part of like the Jays Ring of Honor in that version. Is he a Baseball Hall of Famer? No.
Like, I think it's a perfect way to think about it, right? Like, team Ring of Honor, team Hall of Fame type of guy. Certainly some notable postseason moments, even with the Blue Jays. I had one of the greatest, like, like post home run bat flips of all time, but not a Hall of Famer, not even close.
Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm with you there. Ring of Honor guy, team, Wall of Fame guy for a team, but that's about it.
All right, cool. So we got Carlos Beltran.
The numbers put him in there.
Mm-hmm.
It's what happened afterwards and how much of that, are you going to hold against him?
Well, a lot, depending on your point of view.
Sure. This is his second year on the ballot. I think last year he got what about 40%, 35, 40%, somewhere in that area.
46.5.
Okay. So I think he could have been a first ballot guy had he not been part of that scheme down there in Houston. Obviously, it cost him the job in New York. It tarnished his reputation here, but he's going to get there, in my opinion. I don't think it's this year.
I agree with Chris. It's not going to be probably for a couple of years. I would vote yes for Carlos Beltran.
I would vote for him as well, but I don't think enough other people would.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So I'd be part of the 40 or 45% this year, potentially.
Right.
So we got a pretty big first ballot entry here. Adrian Beltre.
Yeah, he's an easy yes for me. 3,000 hits, just a solid player for the Rangers. No real blemish on his career. I think he's a first ballot guy.
You think he'll get first ballot support?
I do. I think the 3,000 hits will be the number that the voters will look to, and it just doesn't happen much anymore. It used to happen a lot more, but we haven't had a 3,000 hit guy for a while. I think that's gonna carry the day for him.
And almost 500 home runs, along with the 31 plus 100 hits. I would vote for him. Yeah. I'd vote for him this year.
Okay. Mark Burley.
No.
Yeah, I don't think he did enough in his career. A couple of good years, but that's about it.
Okay. Fourth ballot here. First ballot.
For Freddie White Sox fans that might be watching, no, just because he was your favorite doesn't make him a Hall of Fame.
Well, you have a first ballot here, guy. Bartolo Colon.
God, what a legend! Like, if you could say, like, the Fat Man Hall of Fame, he's a first ballot. Like, out of shape old guys want to associate with Bartolo Colon.
Shit, should I come up with that?
I wouldn't disagree with it, and I certainly think he would have a strong Fat Man Hall of Fame first ballot chance.
There you go.
Major league. He had a long, successful career as a starter. Good pitcher.
Mm-hmm.
Character, right? Like, when he hit his first home run of his career in his freaking 40s in San Diego.
That was awesome.
I lost my shit. Like, it's one of the greatest things I've ever seen. But that doesn't translate to Cooperstown for me.
Yeah, Hall of Fame moment there, but career was good. Very good career. I think he's going to get enough votes this time around to hang on the ballot, but I don't ever see him advancing to the Hall of Fame.
If he got 10 or 15% every year, just so we could talk about Bartolo Colon for a minute or two every year, I'm cool with that, right? Like,
see his home run as part of the highlight package. Yeah.
So what do you think he's going to get?
I think he's going to get about 7 to 10%.
Because he was so popular as a player, right?
Right.
Like,
exactly.
I think you could have some people that are just like, shit, I don't care. I'm not voting for some of these roid guys and cheaters. Let me vote for Bartolo Colon. He might get 10%.
Yeah.
Why not? Adrian Gonzalez.
No.
All right. Todd Helton, who probably will.
He was an easy yes for me. I know the Colorado field advantage was played into it somewhat for some of the voters, but I think the numbers are just all across the board, just solid enough, stack up enough to get enough to get to that 75 threshold this year.
I think he gets in this year. Be interested to see if he gets more votes than Belcher. I think Belcher will get more votes. I would vote yes on Todd.
Okay. Matt Holliday.
No.
Yes. I got
What?
10 votes. I got 10
Oh,
votes.
okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
He's an interesting case. There's he never really stood out as being one of the, like, you'd watch him play and think, man, that guy's gonna be in the Hall of Fame one day. But he was around enough. He won. He made the team better. I would vote for him, but I don't know. I think he gets enough to stick around the ballot, but I don't think he's gonna make it.
I love how you put that, Chris. I get 10 votes.
All right.
I love it.
Okay, here's someone I find interesting to me. I love this player. I love this guy, but is he a Hall of Famer? And that's Sorry Hunter.
All good.
Like elite center fielder during his career, right?
Right.
One of the best, certainly one of the best defensive center fielders we've seen in our lifetime. But what is he, like a career 260 hitter?
Yeah, about that.
Batting average to me still matters a little bit, right? I don't think his on base percentage was so overpowering. He hit for some power, but it wasn't like he hit for a ton of power. I mean,
He gets some power, yeah.
And it's compared to his position, no. Like I would think of an Andrew Jones more than I would a Torrey Hunter potentially.
Well, we're getting there, but yeah.
So at this time, I would say no. I don't know if I ever would be a yes. I wouldn't just rule it out though.
Well, Torrey's made it. This is the fourth ballot.
He's got a few more years.
Well, Andrew Jones, who's coming up next, seventh year, over 58% of the ballot. Love Andrew Jones, personally.
I would put him in. I'd vote for him.
I had not been in on him,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm coming around on him with the defense in the premium position of center field. The number of Gold Gloves it's not insignificant. It's not the Jim Cott Gold Glove,
Right.
numbers. He did it at a premium position. The batting average is kind of what hangs up. Got some pretty good power numbers. He had the MVP season. He'd be one of my 10.
Okay.
I don't know if he gets it this year though. He's trending up, but I don't know if he's got enough support there.
He feels like another year to two away. I would vote for him this time though. Like it would be time for me to start voting for him. Past few years would not have been. Because I think of the batting average, right? Was he 250 something career hitter?
250s, yeah.
Yeah, but that power and that defense, I think the Gold Gloves, like sometimes you can earn some of that based off of reputation.
Mm-hmm.
But the eyeball test also told you how special he was as a defensive center fielder for a long time.
Right. So we got Victor Martinez, first year on the ballot. Pretty good player, but does he advance to the second year?
I don't think he gets to 5%.
Yeah.
I don't think so either.
Joe Mauer, it was very interesting to me. I seen so many articles where they said like he's gonna be a first ballot Hall of Famer. It's like, what do you guys think?
He gets one of my 10.
Okay.
I don't think he makes it as a first ballot guy. I think he's in the 60% range. Premium position again as catcher. Played his whole career as a catcher. He didn't like Craig Biggio, bounce out into the field there. MVP season, batting titles. It's just not something you expect out of the catcher role. So I think he's a year 2, year 3 guy.
Yeah, I agree. Jeff?
I don't know that I could vote for him as a first ballot guy. I just don't feel him in that class and in that tier. I agree, like, because of the position he played, to Chris's point, like, because he was a catcher relative to catchers, he's a Hall of Famer. I just don't think it's this year for me.
Okay. Alphabetically, we got Andy Pettit, and he's very interesting to me because he's the guy who sort of like said, like, yeah, I screwed up.
Yeah, I think he's one of the few guys that actually owned up to it.
Yeah. What does that mean?
I don't think about Andy Pettit in any way, shape, or form in relation to steroids. And frankly, I think I don't care about the steroids thing. I shouldn't say don't care, but baseball's history is littered with cheaters.
Mm-hmm.
Whitey Ford was a cheater. You know, like Gaylord Perry was a notorious cheater, right?
Right.
Like you go on throughout history of guys that were throwing shine balls and spitballs and doing all types of different things. And
but this is different though. This is an era where he's saying like everyone's screwing up, and hey, so did I. Like I don't know. It's so different.
I'm trying to keep it to the on the field stuff, right? And
Sure.
like it's a trick of, if you watched him just in the regular season, was he a Hall of Famer? Absolutely not. When you look at some of the big spots and big games and big moments he threw in, you're like, hey, maybe you have a case. I would not vote for him personally, but I could understand why some others might.
Yeah, his postseason definitely trumped his regular season when it came to the big games. I wouldn't vote for him as well. I just didn't see enough all around.
But I would tell you this, like if my team was in the World Series and he was one of the 4 starting pitchers, I would feel really damn good about that.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. Brendan Phillips.
Fun player, but Cincinnati Reds Ring of Honor type player.
Mm-hmm.
Would me voting for Brandon Phillips mean that I get to take his wife?
Okay, I was wondering if you knew who his wife was. So,
of course I fucking do. She follows me on Twitter. I love Jake. Yes, like God. No, Brandon Phillips won me a fantasy base.
Oh, she does not.
Huh? Yes, she does. She follows my wrestling channel. Yes, she does. Absolutely, she does. I was one of the first 50 people she followed. Fuck you. No, all joking aside, Jade can continue to deny her true love, which is me. You know, fine, whatever. She and Brandon and their daughter can live a happy life. No, not a Hall of Famer. Like, good player, right? I'll always be thankful. Won me a baseball fantasy title one year over a decade ago. Not a Hall of Famer.
Okay, before we continue, no, I was blown away. I should not have been. But please tell Chris who Brandon Phillips' wife is.
Jade Cargill, who's now in WWE. She used to play basketball at Jacksonville State back in her college days. She wrestled in AEW for a couple of years. My type of woman all the way. You look her up. If you don't know who she is, look her up, Chris. Know me. That's my type of woman. It's Jade Cargill. Like, she's on that Serena Williams tier for me.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll check her out.
Yeah, only if Serena Williams would like get her ass kicked.
Or kick ass, which is even hotter.
God damn. All right. If we didn't sound any whiter.
They don't call me the swirl zaddy for nothing. Continue, please, sir.
Manny Ramirez.
Absolutely, yes. Fuck the steroid and estrogen stuff. Everybody was doing it. Yeah, like the what was it, the testosterone blocker he was trying to take at one point.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Did he get caught twice?
Yeah, he got caught twice.
Yeah.
Here's the way I think about it. All of his numbers are obviously there, and he played in an era full of that. Manny was the guy that started to change the trajectory of that Red Sox organization. When he was signed by the Indians at the time, like it was, in that A-Rod first big contract type of days, right? But when Manny got, what was it, 160 over 8, that was a massive contract at the time. Indians were never the same after he left, and the Red Sox went to a whole different level.
Well,
absolutely, absolutely, 100%. Manny being Manny, I want to see his Hall of Fame speech someday.
Yeah, if history's any indication, he's probably not going to make it.
Yep.
I've been kind of a hardline guy against the known steroids guys. He got caught twice. That's, to me, I hear what you said earlier about the baseball's littered with cheaters and whatnot. I'm probably still out on him at this point, though.
And I understand it. And my only other counter to it, and I realize there's a different process and different justification, but to me it is relevant. Once Bud Selig got into the Hall of Fame, who was the man that was asleep at the wheel and perhaps even encouraged this type of stuff at the time, once Bud Selig got in, to me, that drops the moratorium on the roid guys, or drops the block on the roid guys, right? I understand for others, there's an integrity to the game piece, that's fine. But once Selig got in, I'm like, you can't tell the history of Major League Baseball.
I agree.
Yeah, that's a great point. I hadn't really thought of it that way. I mean, Selig definitely lowered the bar in a lot of ways. Forever grateful that he bought the team and brought him to Milwaukee, but I couldn't get rid of him fast enough after he got into that commissioner role.
Speaking of former steroid guy and Milwaukee, Jose Reyes.
Pass.
Pass.
All right, A-Rod.
Yes. I can't say yes to Manny and then not say yes to A-Rod, right? And I wonder if there will be a piece of because of A-Rod working with MLB and being in the media now, I wonder if that's going to ever help him in terms of the Hall of Fame.
Hasn't yet.
Image. It hasn't yet. What percentage of vote has he been getting?
33? 35.7 last year.
He's not likely to get above 50 by the time his 10th year, right?
Probably not. So here's my biggest one here after, which is Francisco Rodriguez. And personally, I'm not a Billy Wagner guy. I'm not. I think K-Rod is the best reliever here left. Tell me why I'm right or wrong.
On the field, having watched him pitch for the Brewers, you're right. Off the field, seeing him or hearing about him and what he did with his fiance, girlfriend, wife, you're wrong.
Okay, so I didn't know. What did he do?
Oh, he had domestic violence charges against him, and
him too?
I didn't know that. They were dropped because he was traded or signed elsewhere. Mm-hmm. So never was prosecuted for it, but the charges were brought, and so that's has me out on him.
No, I did not know that actually until now.
I'm thinking, it's a debate in my head.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's so clear cut that it's Billy Wagner or K-Rod, right? I think some of Billy Wagner's numbers are a little better, but if I had to close out a game for the World Series, who am I going to? It's not Billy Wagner.
No, that's the same. I kind of feel the same way with you there. On the field, yes, it's Francisco Rodriguez, but his off the field is what has me out on him. That's being said, I look at some of the guys that missed out being sticking around on the ballot a few years back, like a Joe Nathan missed by three votes. John Franco, geez, what they do with him? Another guy, he missed by 3 votes to be able to kind of stay on there. Both those guys I have ahead of both Rodriguez and Billy Wagner, in my opinion. And when you look at relievers, Franco a little bit of different reliever because it was kind of that early 80s. Nathan more the one inning guy, but I think both of them were more Hall worthy than Rodriguez or Wagner. And I do believe that both Rodriguez and Wagner will make it at some point.
And I think I might go a little differently in why I would say no on K-Rod for now. And it might be the length of time. Because if I'm not mistaken, Wagner retired several years ahead of Francisco.
Yeah, Wagner's been on the ballot for a few more years, so Francisco would have more time to accumulate votes.
Yeah, so I would say no at this time for K-Rod. Reserve the right to come back a year or two later and say I would vote for him then.
Yeah, fair.
All right, so we also have Jimmy Rollins and Gary Sheffield, two very interesting players here.
Is Sheffield in his last year on the modern ballot?
Yes.
Yes.
Gary Sheffield is on his last year.
He kind of gets the reputation of being an accumulator because of all the teams he played for.
Well,
But
he was get a reputation for that. He also gets a reputation for being part of the Mitchell Report and
Velcro ties.
Yes.
Yeah.
Being a prick early in his career.
Oh, for sure. You know, when he was drafted by the Brewers and coming up, I mean, he didn't spend much time in the minors, but that was the first time in my fandom where it felt like the Brewers had a superstar in the wings. You know, somebody that was coming up that was going to just dominate, and he did, just not for Milwaukee. When he went to San Diego, when he played with Florida, those were his years. And then after that, you know, he had how many teams did he play for? 8?
9, I think.
Like 8, 9, yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, he just kept finding work. He ended up with the numbers that are typical for a Hall of Fame career, but he does have the stuff against him. If you're gonna vote for a 10th year guy, because I guess I can see it based on the numbers. If you overlook everything else, but damn, when he was drafted, I wanted him to be a star.
Yeah, he was going to be our generation's like Robin Yount for the Brewers, right? Or a Molitor, right? And he just unfortunately wasn't.
Right. Well, I mean, he was Dwight Gooden's nephew. You know, Gooden was at the time was hotter than shit.
Yeah.
You had that connection. Yeah, I mean, he played the premium position as shortstop at the time. You know, it didn't work out in Milwaukee. It worked out elsewhere. He's got the numbers to stack up. It wouldn't bother me if he ended up in the Hall of Fame. My card collection would appreciate it. But I don't know if he's going to have enough support this year.
How many career home runs did he have? It was
512, I think. It was over 500.
Yeah, and here's my thing. If Gary Sheffield plays in the 70s and the 80s, he's a first ballot guy. Because it wouldn't even be a steroids thing, right? Even though we know going back to the 80s and the 70s, steroids were certainly a part of the game.
Yeah, more so amphetamines and cocaine, but yeah, steroids are there too.
Those are stimulants and potential performance enhancers too, right? And
absolutely.
I think of all of that. So I would be a yes on Gary Sheffield in year 10.
Right. Yeah, and I'm kind of feeling the same way.
Yep.
So here's a question for both of you. So Gary was a bit of a vagabond in his career, where he honestly don't know how many teams he played for. Does that matter? Because we're going to look at Kenny Lofton, a player who was with 9 or 10 teams. Does this hurt him?
Like, I'm a huge Kenny Lofton guy. I always have been. I go back to the 2003 Cubs that layered on another thing of respect. Like, if you wanted to win effing games and get to a big time like playoff series, World Series, Kenny Lofton is like your prototype ideal leader.
But we're talking about does this hurt Sheffield?
I think it absolutely does, doesn't it, Chris? Kirk, because
yeah,
he doesn't have one fan base or one set of media that might be like pounding the drum for him.
That's just it. I mean, he played for more. We forget more teams than he played for. You know, you remember him with. Well, for me, it's the Brewers, the Padres, the
And a World
Marlins.
Series champion. We have to think about who that is.
What that?
He's a World Series champion.
With the Marlins.
Marlins,
Right,
yep.
but I mean, like a Gary Sheffield, like he won a title. Like, oh, who?
But when you think about that 97
Tigers?
Marlins team, who do you think about? You think about Levon Hernandez.
Mhm.
You think about not Pudge Rodriguez. I'm sorry. I'm thinking of 2003 now.
Yeah.
Renteria.
You think about Edgar Renteria, you know. So like when you think about who all was on that team, who was it? Jeff Conine was on that team.
Right,
Conine,
but
Conine the Barbarian. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
it's part of it though, right? No.
Charles Johnson, the catcher.
Well, I'm pointing out, like, you think about that 97 Marlins championship, he's not the first guy you think of. It's a fair point,
Yeah,
right? Like the
yeah.
World Series, you forget that he actually won. You also don't really associate him with it.
Mhm.
And I almost made the mistake there because I'm thinking 2003, you associate with the Marlins, you think of Josh Beckett, and you think of Pudge Rodriguez, and you think of Dontrell Willis, you know, as a rookie, right? Miguel Cabrera.
Miguel Cabrera, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, like 97, I think about Levon.
I do too.
And Kevin Brown too.
Yeah, Kevin Brown. Yeah, they bought that team.
They bought that team, and then Kevin Brown was pitching the next year in the World Series for San Diego. Sure was.
Wow, wow. All right, I'll go through this quick here. James Shields.
Nope.
There we go. Chase Utley. Here's an interesting one.
I think when you look at him compared to other second basemen, yes. When you look at him compared to maybe some of the positions, it starts to get a little shaky. I'm a yes on him. I'd vote for him this year. Hate the rule. I think that took away from the game. But what he did, I think he's earned it.
I think that's the key there, right? Is the positional comparison, which baseball has done a pretty good job, I think, historically, of measuring position guys against their peers and like historicals at the same position. Utley won a World Series, was a key cog. Like you viewed him as a leader of that Phillies team, right? I think about him before I think about Jimmy Rollins. I would probably be a yes on Chase Utley.
Okay. No, the last guy left is Omar Vizquel.
3 years ago, easy yes. Has anything really come of it though? I mean, have we heard anything since the initial reporting of his issues?
Well, nothing, and that's all that we need.
No, I've always wondered, like, what? Maybe Chris, this is where you could say, let's pretend he didn't have any off the field stuff.
He's in right now. He was projected. He was trending up.
What is the appeal for him as a Hall of Famer? Like, talk to me about that for a minute, if you don't mind.
Yeah, you bet. So the appeal is leadership, defense, and longevity. The longevity thing, yeah, you gotta stay in shape. You gotta be able to go out there. And play at a high enough level that they want to continue to put you out there. The defense thing, I think, is really where he was made his hay.
And if he played in like the Ozzie Smith era, you know, before Cal Ripken, where power at the shortstop position didn't matter as much, you know, then I could maybe see it. But when I look at Omar Vizquel, I'm like, he was a light hit guy, no power. To me, he feels like a glorified role player. That's always been my struggle with him. Like, how does he go beyond? We talked about Andrew Jones, for example, said he played defense at an elite level for a long time at a premium position. Batting average, power numbers, damn good. Vizquel had none of that.
If I can, I think that Vizquel is a defensive compiler.
Defensive compiler.
Sure. And even then, what did he compile?
Compiled defensive metrics in terms of DB WAR.
And it's like, that's nice. Like, he was a great defensive shortstop, but that doesn't make him a great Hall of Fame shortstop.
I didn't say he was. Hall, very good.
I agree with that. Like, I understand, Chris, where you're coming from. It could be like how we view the game, right? And value different things. I never watched Omar Vizquel and said, "Oh my God, this guy's Cooperstown about somebody." No way.
No, that's a great point. And my opinion of him being a Hall of Famer now was based on his projection or his trajectory before the news came out on him. So
Yikes. No bueno. Was he the last guy for the baseball ones, Kirk?
Yep, he is the last. Okay, so at this point, we're gonna look at the people who we've lost. And wish Evan was there because Evan is so much better at this than I am. Does anyone want to do like a like no?
yeah.
Good riddance, Kissinger.
God damn it. Okay, you all suck.
He stole his thunder.
I tried, man. I tried. Okay. Evan, buddy, I love you, but like I'm just not that good at this. Okay. So here are the people who we lost over the last 2 weeks here. Yeah. All right. Well, Henry Kissinger. Go on.
May he rot in hell. I don't care when somebody says, well, you got to look at the context. No, sometimes I don't need to look at the context of a Stalin or a Hitler or a Mussolini, right? Like, he's not on that level by any stretch of the imagination, but policies that he helped perpetuate, especially in Cambodia alone, yeah, may he rot.
Not where I thought this was going to go, but okay.
Chris says ditto.
Yeah,
I'm a Canadian.
His policies have set the world back, and
his neocon ways, like even though Chris and I are on slightly different political spectrums, this is a pretty uniting, like unanimous thing. Like, this was a piece of shit.
Yeah,
and he got to live to 100.
Yeah, I won't go as far as you, but yeah. The world's maybe a little better today.
Yeah,
because he still had influence in his late years, and that's the scary part.
And Chris, if I may, think about how messed up this world is. We have kids that die from cancer. I think way back in the day, right? Like Princess Di, like that was a woman that legitimately did some good in the world, and it's Henry Kissinger that lives to 100.
Yeah,
no justice in this world sometimes.
Oh, for fuck, okay. I'm just trying to like do what like Evan does. Like, god damn it, you assholes. Okay.
Guess we're not gonna get invited back.
Evan might say this and say, "This is great."
Hey, Evan, like I tried, buddy. Like, for fucking.
Who else did we lose?
All right, we're just gonna do this really quick, okay?
All right.
Are we sure?
Yeah.
Damn it, all of you assholes.
Who else passed away in the past 2 weeks?
Peter Kielma died. Want to know who that is?
Enlighten me.
I shall. Because once we started doing this, Evan and I realized that, oh my god, a whole bunch of Hungarians are getting killed.
Oh, so this is the Beige Mistress?
Yes, thank you.
Oh,
Beige Mistress has shown up, and this is somebody who 1984 Olympian. So there you go.
what sport?
Skiing.
Skiing. Okay.
There you go. All right, in baseball, it's pretty big. This made me feel really old, actually. Willie Hernandez.
Yeah. That does make me feel old.
Made me feel really old. 1984 MVP and Cy Young winner.
Guillermo Hernandez.
Yeah, man. Yeah, so that was pretty big. I
And
remember.
and what, the 84 Tigers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like you might think of Kirk Gibson and Jack Morris from that team, but they weren't the best player on the team that year, right? And I think about him
Oh, that's
as
the team that's who I thought of.
what's that?
Oh, Willie Hernandez.
And my point is, you others would think about like Trammell and Whitaker and like all the other guys I just named, right? Yet he was the best player on that team that year. And you might think about him, Kirk, because you followed him more closely or you have a greater appreciation for the game and the history. You remember it. He's one of those guys that falls under the radar and just to me is like forgotten about, like how good he was at his peak.
Yeah, I mean, like that was his year. I mean, like he was only 69, which was kind of like crazy to me. So, we lost 6 football players here. Dave Young, 1980 All-American at Purdue, tight end. Ron Axe. No, okay.
One of the great names.
There we go. Age 79, linebacker. He played 10 years with Atlanta and New England and Green Bay. Mark Keller, he played 3 years at running back at the Vikings. Oh, this one's fascinating to me. Harold Hasselback.
Matt's father? Matt's father?
No. Won a Grey Cup with the Calgary, but he is one of 10 players who won a Grey Cup and a Super Bowl. Pretty cool, huh?
It is very cool.
What did he win the Super Bowl with?
He won the Super Bowl with
Wasn't the Vikings.
Kansas City.
All right.
That's I knew you were going to get a CFL reference in there at some point.
I wasn't trying to. Yeah, so there's that. A couple of other names here that I think are really worth mentioning. All right, I'm old.
Yes.
Do you know the Crofts?
The what?
The Crofts.
Is this hockey?
The Crofts. Well, Marty Croft died.
The Land of the Lost, right?
There you go. Thank you.
Okay. I was thinking sports, so
yeah, you were throwing me off. I was thinking like, no, is this like a hockey guy?
No, Banana Split.
Sid and Marty Croft, yeah.
So like he passed away at the age of 96.
Wow.
Saxophonist Mars Williams died. Psychedelic furs. No? Oh, fuck that. God damn it. God damn Evan, I wish you were here. He's better at this than I am. All right, I'll just stop here. I hate you both.
No, you don't. You brought this on yourself, dude.
I did not. This is what I do every week. He's just better at this. One of my favorite singers has passed away. Shane McGowan.
Oh,
Yeah.
did he?
Saw that earlier today. Yeah.
Did he really?
Yes.
Did not know that.
Yeah.
How old was he?
He was 65.
That's too young.
Mm-hmm. All right. So woo, woo, woo. Yeah. Woo, woo, woo. No?
No, but it was a good effort.
He said no, it was a good effort.
The Pogues. The Pogues. Come on, man. The Pogues.
I live near Canada, not in Canada. I'm sorry.
Hey, they're from Ireland.
Same
In Ireland.
Whatever.
Sakes. All right. All right, with that, we're gonna be doing our fine. We're gonna finish this off because like they're making fun of me, and that's okay.
Well, we didn't get a chance to talk about CM Punk or Randy Orton or anything. I'm very disappointed in you, Kirk.
No, we're not done yet.
Good.
All right. Which is the elevator up, elevator down.
Elevator up, elevator down.
Yes.
The elevator up and elevator down is like who has made their sort of like elevator up or elevator down for their Hall of Fame chances. So let's go elevator up. Obviously, my good friend here, Jeff, knows where I'm going to go with elevator up.
I do.
Go, run with it.
Would you want to talk about CM Punk?
Yeah, we're doing CM Punk.
Yeah, I would certainly think the elevator is up in terms of his WWE Hall of Fame chances, right? Because he finally came back into the fold after almost a decade away.
Yes.
I certainly think this is one of these situations where he was out of wrestling for a long time. He went to AEW. He saw what happened when you have a man-child running shit versus grown corporate professionals that aren't coked up on cocaine like they do it the old-fashioned way. It's roids and weed. But you know, one thing you can always say about WWE, all the things you can knock about, one thing you could always say, unless it's getting Macho Man in the Hall of Fame while he's effing alive, is never say never. They brought back so many people over the years that have burned bridges, that Vince has hated and detested, and they get, for God's sakes, a decade ago they got Bruno to come back so he could go into the Hall of Fame. Bruno Sammartino. So CM Punk coming back now, I think, is a thing of, it's a low risk, medium to high reward opportunity for WWE. Because Punk's been gone so long, he can wrestle so many guys that he hasn't faced in years or at all. Like, imagine him and Cody Rhodes at some point in a program, and they can play off the AEW shit. And him and Seth Rollins will be really good, especially make Seth Rollins be serious. So CM Punk's elevator is certainly up. He could be looking at a night one WrestleMania 40 main event, which is no small thing, especially if recent reports are anywhere we're close to true, and that his match might be Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Yeah, and I think that it's almost a lock at this point. Well, not lock, but it's huge.
It gives him a chance to where he doesn't have to wait for years and years to get into the WWE Hall of Fame. They might do it while he's still there. So it's certainly helped, right? I would totally and completely agree with that. So that's one. Elevator up.
There you go. So Chris, you're a hockey guy like me. What I don't know, Jeff, do you follow hockey like us?
Not really. Like, if you're going to talk to me some about the Great One, Super Mario, Jaromir Jagr, like some of those guys from the past.
No, not like that. Yeah. So,
but unless we're going to talk about Connor Bedard, it's mostly a no for me, dog, at this point.
We are.
Well,
we are. So like the Hart Trophy, you know what that is, right?
MVP.
Yeah, more or less. So like, not more or less, it is. I don't know. How do I put this here? I think the Chicago Blackhawks will be the only team ever that will have two former Hart Trophy winners who will not get into the Hockey Hall of Fame. All right, Chris, you know where we're going with this?
Well, guessing you're heading towards Corey Perrytown.
Corey Perry, yes. All right, I'm going to run with the first person now, Taylor Hall.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so Taylor Hall, very good player, very good hockey player. When you look at the MVP award for most trophies, technically it's supposed to be for who is the best player on your team overall? Now, yeah. When we're looking at Corey Perry and our other friend here, it's a little bit different.
So Taylor Hall, he won the MVP, the Hart Trophy.
Thank you.
In with the Devils. You could argue whether he was the best player in the league that year.
Well,
with Nathan MacKinnon, but
so let's
he won it.
That.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, because you're 1,000% right there. I'm sort of like throwing myself out there because like I'm not even sure. Taylor Hall was a great player that particular year. And when we look at what the MVP means and what the Hart means, it was like, who's the best player for that? Who's the most valuable player for that team? Right?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, Taylor Hall was the best player to get that team to the playoffs. Saying that, Taylor Hall did not. Was Taylor Hall the best player in the league?
So without Taylor Hall on the Devils don't make the playoffs. So
Right.
The argument that he was the most valuable player to his team, you can make that argument.
Sure.
Whether you feel he was the best player in the league that year, I think you have a stronger argument for Nathan MacKinnon that year.
Right.
That being said, the voters did what they did, and Taylor Hall won the hardware.
Right. Which isn't the worst thing. I'm not sure that if I had a vote, I'd do differently. Saying that, Taylor Hall is now hurt. He's a player with the Chicago Blackhawks. He is not in great physical shape and probably will not have 1,000 points, correct?
No, I would say he's on the downside of his career for sure.
Right. So they also signed Corey Perry. Corey Perry. All right, do you want to take this?
So Corey Perry had obviously a great career with mostly with the Ducks. Had some good seasons with Montreal, with Tampa Bay, where he made some runs to potentially win some additional Stanley Cups. Didn't quite get there.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was brought in to be a mentor, leader type player for the Blackhawks, being a rebuilding team. And
mentor for
there are well, the Blackhawks, through the luck of the ping pong balls, won the right to draft Connor Bedard, a generational talent. And he is proven to be every bit the talent that he was thought to be. So there are rumors out there around why Corey Perry was summarily dismissed from the Blackhawks. They said it was not performance related. The rumors are that it had to do with Connor Bedard and Connor Bedard family members, specifically female family member. Don't know if that's true or not, but I have not really heard enough vehement denials that would lead me to believe that not something there.
And that's where we are here with Taylor Hall and Corey Perry, which I think will have to be the first time ever, could be wrong, where we have a team that has two active Hart Trophy winners who will not make the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, Taylor Hall, I don't think was actually on a projection to make the Hall of Fame.
Sure.
trajectory. Corey Perry, I think, was borderline. I think him bouncing between the Canadians and the Tampa Bay Lightning, I think in an effort to win another cup, to kind of solidify that for himself, I think kind of shows where he was at. He obviously wasn't going to win a cup this year. But I think if these rumors turn out to be,
Well,
they stick around long enough, I think it definitely does prevent him from achieving that Hall of Fame status.
So let's look at the rumors itself. So worst case scenario, he was with Connor's mom. Worst case.
Call me mentor, call me daddy.
Well, that's the
Waiting
thing.
to see what you're gonna do.
Connor is young enough, and Corey Perry is age enough that it's not really that different between his parents and Corey Perry.
He could be an age-appropriate stepdaddy, right?
Which is kind of weird, but yeah.
Well, Connor's mom has got it going on. Connor's mom. No?
And how much does that suck, right? I know you guys are talking about Hall of Fame, but we're talking about a kid that's a generational talent. The Sidney Crosby type,
Sure.
the Patrick Kane type, right? In terms
That's
of when
why they brought him in to mentor.
Yeah, and like it epically backfires. And it's like you wonder how long you're always going to think about this in association with Connor Bedard, even though he has nothing to do with it.
If it's true.
If it's true, it probably is. That's a very random thing for it to not be true.
Well, okay, but here's for me. When I'm looking at this, the worst case scenario is that it's true. Best case scenario is that they got rid of him because they heard a bunch of other shit. Because let's just also be blunt. The Chicago Blackhawks have done a lot of crap. With Kyle Beach and some other stuff. So it's not altogether possible that Corey Perry just said, "Hey, man, come back to my hotel." I know that was awful. That was a terrible impression, but dead serious.
A question, as I'm not as much of a hockey guy, how many Hart Trophy winners have not ended up in the Hockey Hall of Fame?
There's a few.
Because I was trying to think you guys are talking about Hall and Perry, right? And I would agree, like while I don't know as much about hockey, I would at least tend to know like the Hall of Fame players, generally speaking, right? Like they're big enough names for me as a very, very casual viewer to be like, okay, I know who the hell they are. I'll give you an NBA comparison. When you look at the history of the NBA and the Most Valuable Player Award, I still think the only player to win the MVP that's likely not to end up in the Basketball Hall of Fame is Derrick Rose.
Agreed.
Right? Like his peak, he had a couple years there where you're like, this guy's on a Hall of Fame trajectory. But he only had 1 year at Memphis. Even when you look at the totality of his basketball career, like the Basketball Hall of Fame does, like that's something, right? To be the MVP 1 year in the entire league during the peak of Kobe's career, Dwayne Wade's career, Kobe was still, LeBron still peak of his career. Kobe still pretty good, right?
Yeah.
And he's the only one. So I was just thinking, like, what does that say about Taylor Hall, Corey Perry? Did they win Hart trophies in down years? Is it more of a reflection of down years, or that they had one like aberration of the season for them relative to their rest of their career?
Fluke, in my opinion. Chris?
So Corey Perry had a very strong career. He was Perry Getzlaf out there in Anaheim. I believe they had, was it one cup or two?
At least one, right?
At least one, yep. So he's checking a lot of boxes there.
Yeah.
And he was a top line player that drove that team between him and Getzlaf. So I think his career was on a Hall of Fame trajectory. And Taylor Hall never lived up to being that number one pick hype that he came in with. And I think maybe some of that works against him as well. He had come in with so much fanfare and was a good player, great player at times, but didn't have a great career. And
especially when you talk about the history of hockey and some of the guys that have went number one overall, right? Like
Mhm.
you go, not every year is going to have a generational or superstar talent go number one,
No.
but we certainly have a
Taylor
lineage.
Hall was considered not that generational to that point, but like third tier.
Yeah, see, he was in that that era when Edmonton was winning the first overall pick year after year after year, without winning any games.
Yeah,
But yeah, you talk
cup
about,
after cup. Oh no, it didn't.
yeah, the now Yakupov era. But there's been a few recent kind of misses on that number one overall pick. Alexander Daigle probably being one of the most recognizable names.
No. But anyway, sorry.
Yes. But yeah, so I just think that Taylor Hall had a very strong career. I don't think he was ever looked at as being a future Hall of Famer once the Blaze met the ice.
I've got another elevator down guy. It's not hockey related, obviously.
Hey, go ahead.
And maybe this is a little delayed. He's going to get in the Hall of Fame someday, but I think it could be a delay in terms of how long it takes for him to get in, and that's James Harden.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Because when you look at James Harden, this is a guy that even if he never won a championship, but he had stayed with the Thunder and then went to the Rockets and played the rest of his career in Houston, and he accumulated massive numbers but never won shit, people would be like, well, yeah, he was still a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Mm-hmm.
But when you start to look at the entirety of his body of work, right? Like he gets traded to Houston, becomes a franchise guy for a few years. People, for some reason, think he isn't a total putz. He's a total playoff choke artist, right? Then he forces his way to Brooklyn because he wants to play with Durant and Irving. And that's a freaking disaster, and he has more playoff choke jobs. Then he forces his way to Philly, and he has more choke jobs. He's a pain in the fucking ass. And now he's with the Clippers, and inevitably the Clippers aren't going to do shit when it really matters. And certainly he isn't going to when it really matters. James Harden is one of the worst playoff performers in any sport of a marquee, like big name talent that I've ever seen in any sport. And when I think about James Harden, he's going to get in. Like, I cannot fight against that. But I wonder, like, all of this, he keeps forcing himself out of teams and situations when he's the problem to go elsewhere.
Okay. All right. So to that point there, Jeff, I hear 1,000% what you're saying. Is so Tristan McGrady was a first ballot Hall of Famer. By that token, it's not Harden.
It is not, right? But that's why I'm wondering of like James Harden went from a first ballot Hall of Famer to he might have to wait some time.
Okay, but if we're comparing him to T-Mac, who went in first ballot, that's where I'm going with this.
Yeah, so I think the difference though is T-Mac, like when he went as a free agent from Toronto to Orlando, like he was a fan favorite.
Oh, I remember.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. He goes to Houston, and he's a fan favorite. Him and Yao, and like McGrady had some ways about him, but he wasn't a clear franchise roster killer like James Harden is. And I wonder if voters are going to hold that more against him than like somebody like a T-Mac who didn't win shit at the end of the day. Great player, deserves to be in the Hall of Fame.
We don't even know who the voters are, which is why we do all this stuff.
Yeah.
With McGrady too, who else was on the ballot at the time? Was he on the ballot in a kind of a down year, or was he clearly? And it's not to knock what kind of career McGrady had. I don't know as well as the two of you do, obviously, but definitely recognize his name and know he was a great player. And it didn't sound like he was kind of the I don't want to say cancerous player that Harden is, but he's an irritant amongst the teams he goes to. And
I think it's fair to call him a cancer. He absolutely is a cancer, right? Like, he is the problem. He goes somewhere and shit gets worse.
Hmm.
Even think about when Chris Paul went there to play with him with the Rockets, right? How long did that last before he's trying to get his way the hell out of there?
Yeah.
I think that's another elevator down guy for me, not in terms of he's not going to go in the Hall of Fame, but it doesn't help. I'll tell you another guy, Shaquille Leonard, linebacker that just recently got cut by the Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah. Run with that. One year.
Yeah, so this was a guy to start off his career, right? Like, he was a premier off-ball linebacker. Like, he was all pro, super stud, guy, second round pick from a small school. And, the general manager at the time, Chris Ballard, got knocked for drafting him so high. And I even had like a fourth round grade out. So I was totally wrong on him. But now he's got the knee injury. He just got released by the Colts. And I'm not even sure yet if he's been picked up by anybody or not. But for a guy,
no.
for a guy, like, if you think about premier off-ball linebackers a couple of years ago, you're thinking Shaq Leonard, Darius Leonard clearly is on a Hall of Fame trajectory, even as much as the Hall of Fame doesn't seem to prefer non-pass rushing linebackers. You're like, he's going to be so special that they will make a case to get him in. And now I feel like he has no shot, right? His career feels like it's damn near over. And a few years ago, he seemed like he was on the fast track.
Yeah. Oh, makes sense. Chris?
No, I agree. It's kind of out of sight, out of mind with him because of his injury. But yeah, you remember those years when he came into the league. He was a stud. He was on everybody's, where'd this guy come from? How do you find him? And yeah, it's a shame of the injury, and we'll see where he ends up. Maybe he falls into a situation where the team uses him properly and he can get back to that level. I'm kind of pulling for him because he just seems like a decent dude. I mean, look at what he showed up at the game after they released him still, and fans got to acknowledge him. So,
and that's what sucks about it, right? Is a guy like him, you want to root for a guy like that, and you hate to see a guy's career get shortchanged like that. Like, who does that? The team just cuts you, and you show up to the game and show your face when you absolutely do not have to, should not do so, and you do it anyways.
Yeah,
teams do, man. So with that, we'll just call it here, unless there's any other names here.
I've got one other name on the elevator up. Russell Wilson.
Oh, for elevator up?
Yeah, for elevator up, and here's why I say that. 9-time Pro Bowler, right, with the Seahawks, associated with the Seahawks. Last year was an unmitigated disaster to the point where we were even talking to the group, and I was talking about, hey, on this path, like, Russell Wilson's not going to end up in Canton because he's going to get exposed here, right? And I still think he's not the player that the Broncos have paid for, but he's been better this year. It's not an unmitigated disaster. The Broncos have won a few games in a row, right? They've got some momentum. And it feels like it's just enough to salvage him to say they're going to roll with him in 2024, maybe 2025 in a starter. And he puts up a solid year this year and maybe one or two more. That might make the difference for him to be a Hall of Famer down the road versus the way it was trending starting last year. Felt like he was potentially getting himself out of that spot. I don't know what you guys think.
No, I agree. He's been a revelation this year compared to last year. Not quite compared to where he was, but no, you make a great point there. If he continued his trajectory from last year, he'd have been. I don't know that he would not have made the Hall of Fame because he did have a really strong career with Seattle. Super Bowl wins, the Pro Bowls.
He wouldn't have been first ballot, though, which for a 9-time Pro Bowler at quarterback and the recent history of quarterbacks getting in so early would have felt weird, but it would have felt right.
Right. And, a Wisconsin guy, too, he came up there. So, I got to see him in college and then got to watch him torment the Packers. Yeah, so I'm kind of happy for him to see him turn it around. Definitely kind of solidifies what Sean Payton kind of said when he came in, how much of a mess that team was after last year, and
Yep.
pulling for them to do good. And so
Yep.
I had a couple of names I wanted to throw out here with right before we wrap up here. Not necessarily elevator up or elevator down, but
sure.
The Green Bay Packers, they have their own team Hall of Fame, and they had their recent elections here, and they will be inducting next summer Clay Matthews and Aaron Campman. So a couple of guys that from the defensive side, a couple of different eras, and a couple of different paths to the Packers. Clay Matthews was a first-round pick. They traded up to get him. Aaron Campman was a fifth-round pick out of Iowa, and they both really they were good team players. I don't of the two, Clay Matthews had the more decorated career. I don't think he rises to the level of Pro Football Hall of Fame, but this is his level that he earned, and I think it's a great accomplishment for both of them. And really appreciate the Packers Hall of Fame and finding these guys and getting them in there.
The one irony, couple ironies I will say about Clay Matthews. In that draft, BJ Raji was the top 10 pick.
Yeah,
that's what I've always found funny about that, right?
Yeah.
And it was Clay Matthews they traded up in the bottom of round 1 to go get. Second, if you told me strictly from an eyeball test that Clay Matthews was a Hall of Famer, this Clay Matthews, Green Bay Packers Clay Matthews, you might not get a ton of disagreement from me. Like, if I was to sit there and say, like, who would I rather want on my defense, him or his dad? I want him.
Yeah, two different players. Clay Matthews, senior, junior.
Was a better all-around player.
Right.
Yeah, like Cleveland, Clay Matthews, I think, was a better all-around player. But in terms of pure impact player, game wrecker, difference maker, I always was annoyed with this Clay Matthews in Green Bay because he would wreck the Bears.
Yeah, when you think back to the clip on the sidelines, Kevin Green telling him, it's your time, go out
That's
there
right.
and in the Super Bowl, and he did.
Yeah, so it was interesting you saying he's not a Hall of, like, a Canton guy, and I'm like, I'm not saying that he is, but I wonder, like, will he ever get any consideration? It could be possible because he was like a 6-time Pro Bowler.
Yeah, so he has definitely some Pro Bowls, might have an All-Pro in there. So I think he'll be a guy that gets on the ballot. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. It might depend on who else is on the ballot at the same time, and who's voting then. But definitely they got. I think they made 2 fine selections there for their team Hall of Fame.
Was it just the 2?
Just the 2, yep. And
that's a name I hadn't heard in a while, Aaron Campman, but he was a dude, right?
Yeah, he was.
I'd agree.
And then this was kind of a topic that was kind of floating around within our group, a couple of guys here. So Brian Bulaga retired with the Packers a couple weeks ago. Another guy that probably rises to the level of being a Packer Hall of Famer. Yep. And kind of came up with the Deshaun Jackson retirement too, where does it mean something when a player comes back and retires with maybe like their original team or their team that they had, the most success with? And I'm kind of the opinion that, it's a nice thing for the team, for the fans. Player can kind of reassociate themselves with the team and their glory years, and the team can use them for PR purposes. Fans can, feel like, hey, I was pissed when you left. Glad glad you're back. We can put bygones be bygones. So I kind of see that with Bulaga, and definitely with Deshaun Jackson. And kind of wonder what your guys' thoughts are on that.
Deshaun Jackson.
Yeah, so he just talk about Deshaun Jackson.
So like so he's probably not a Pro Football Hall of Famer. Saying that, there's something about his overall like yardage per touchdown, which is pretty damn impressive.
He was a monster big play threat, both as a receiver and as a returner, right? And you go, when somebody shows you clips of Deshaun Jackson, it's amazing just how many big time plays he made. And I would be remiss if we were talking about this a little earlier, so I got to bring it up now while we're recorded, I should say. I think of the butterfly effect of Deshaun Jackson's punt return in 2010. Like, I understand like other things had to happen late in the season for the Packers to get in the playoffs. But if the Eagles don't win that game, if Deshaun Jackson doesn't return that punt, Aaron Rodgers may not have a Super Bowl.
That's a great point. You know, that because the Packers made the playoffs that year as a wild card team. You know, they weren't the best in their division, and they got hot at the right time, and they got the help that they needed. And you're right, Bill. Without that punt return, you know, and if Rodgers doesn't have a Super Bowl, what's his candidacy look like? You know, does that keep him from being a first ballot guy or not? I don't think it would, but with just the overall numbers he put up, but it raises some questions.
It would always be a comparison of, well, Brett Favre went to 2 Super Bowls and won one, and you never went to one. Like, it's an interesting like hypothetical. And as much as we can talk about Rodgers, I point back to that Deshaun Jackson punt return. It feels like such an obscure thing that shouldn't be related, but it was one of those dominoes that had to fall.
Yep.
And kept the Bears out of the Super Bowl that year. Like, that's the other significant thing there too. Is like, go ahead.
Packers went down there, and you know they won in Chicago, and Chicago was obviously the better team that year.
Yeah, they were the better team. I mean, they had the quarterback with the ruptured vagina wall. But you know, like he tore his uterus and his twisted his fallopian tubes. Butler. But no, like think about how different the view of Jay Cutler is if he plays in a Super Bowl, even if he doesn't win one. Now now the Bears under Lovie Smith have went to 2 Super Bowls in 5 years. How much longer could Lovie Smith have been the head coach? All because of this Deshaun Jackson play. Like, it set everything else in motion.
Yeah, it's a crazy thread when you look at it.
Yeah, Deshaun Jackson was a 2nd round pick out of Cal. In all,
okay, guys.
Career. Yeah, I know you're drinking. You're having fun.
Yes, I am.
Hey, I not hating.
Saying that, we're gonna move this here to another show. So,
yes, sure thing.
So thank you so much for being part of this. Thank you so much for being part of the Bucknerverse.
We have to do this again. This is fun.
No, absolutely. So it's much appreciated, and all the things that we're doing here, wherever you're looking at, wherever you're going here, wherever you're going to be, stay safe, everybody.
Look at this guy. Look at this guy. He said, "Stop recording." Whenever you click stop recording, that is. It's still recording.